The kindness of strangers. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead as Sarah Martinez stood in the baby formula aisle of the neighborhood grocery store. Her 3-month-old son, Lucas, slept peacefully in her arms, his tiny chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. The late afternoon sun filtered through the store's large windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Sarah's brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her cream-colored cardigan showed the gentle wear of countless washings. She looked tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from sleepless nights and endless worry. In her free hand, she clutched a small canvas bag filled with quarters, nickels, and dimes, coins she had carefully collected from couch cushions, her car's cup holders, and the bottom of her purse. The baby formula section stretched before her like a wall of impossible choices. Premium brands with their shiny labels and promises of complete nutrition stood next to more affordable options. Sarah's eyes moved slowly across the shelves, calculating prices in her head. She had done this calculation dozens of times at home, but standing here in the store, with Lucas warm against her chest, the reality felt different. $27.63. That was exactly how much she had counted and recounted in her bag of change. It would be enough for 1 container of formula, maybe 2 if she chose the smaller sizes. But small sizes meant more trips to the store, more gas money she didn't have, more time away from the part-time cleaning job that barely kept them afloat. Sarah shifted Lucas gently to her other arm and reached for a blue container of Gentle Care Premium. The label promised all the nutrients a growing baby needed, with added vitamins for development. She turned it over to check the price one more time, though she already knew it by heart. $26.49. Behind her, she heard the soft footsteps of another customer entering the aisle. She didn't turn around, too focused on her own small crisis. The quarters in her bag felt heavy, each one representing a choice she had made over the past week. Skip the coffee at the gas station. Walk to the nearby store instead of driving. Eat peanut butter sandwiches for dinner 3 nights in a row. The footsteps stopped a few feet behind her. Sarah glanced over her shoulder briefly and saw a tall man in a dark business suit. He was well-dressed, with neatly styled dark hair and the kind of confident posture that spoke of success. His attention seemed to be on his phone, but something about his stillness suggested he was aware of her situation. Sarah turned back to the formula, cradling Lucas closer. The baby stirred slightly in his sleep, his tiny fingers curling around the edge of her cardigan. She thought about the empty container at home, the one she had been carefully measuring to make last as long as possible. Tomorrow morning, there would be nothing left. The man behind her cleared his throat softly. When Sarah didn't respond, he took a half-step closer. She could sense his presence without turning around, and it made her slightly uncomfortable. Was she taking too long? Was she blocking his access to something on the shelf? "Excuse me," she said quietly, starting to move aside. "No, please," came a gentle voice. "You're not in my way." Sarah looked over her shoulder again. The man had put his phone away and was looking at her with kind brown eyes. There was something familiar about him, though she couldn't place where she might have seen him before. Maybe he was a regular at one of the office buildings she cleaned. "I couldn't help but notice," he said carefully, his voice low so as not to wake the baby, "that you're shopping for formula." Sarah nodded, suddenly self-conscious about her bag of change and her worn clothing. "Yes, for my son." The man smiled, and the expression transformed his entire face. "He's beautiful." "How old?" 3 months, Sarah replied, automatically adjusting Lucas's blanket. "The early months are the hardest," the man said with understanding. "I remember when my daughter was that age. The constant feedings, the worry about having enough of everything." Sarah felt her shoulders relax slightly. There was no judgment in his voice, only the shared recognition of a fellow parent. She turned to face him more fully. "I'm David," he said, extending his hand. "Sarah," she replied, shifting Lucas so she could shake his hand briefly. David's eyes moved to the formula container she still held and then to the bag of change in her other hand. His expression grew thoughtful, but not pitying. Instead, he looked like someone who understood exactly what it meant to count every penny. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I hope you don't mind me asking, but are you paying with change today?" Sarah's cheeks grew warm. She nodded, unable to find her voice for a moment. The shame she had been holding at bay suddenly threatened to overwhelm her. "There's no shame in that," David said quickly, as if reading her thoughts. "I've been there too. Different circumstances, maybe, but I know what it's like to worry about having enough." Lucas stirred in Sarah's arms, making a soft cooing sound. Both adults looked down at him, and the moment gave Sarah time to collect herself. "Would you allow me to help?" David asked gently. "I'd like to put your formula on my card." Sarah looked up at him in surprise. "Oh, no, I couldn't." "That's very kind, but..." "Please," David interrupted softly. "Sometimes we all need a little help. And sometimes, if we're lucky, we're in a position to give it." There was something in his tone, a sincerity that made Sarah pause. She studied his face, looking for any sign of pity or condescension. She found none. Instead, she saw genuine kindness and the kind of understanding that only came from real experience. "Why?" she asked simply. David was quiet for a long moment. "Because someone did the same for me once, when my wife and I were struggling with a new baby and I had just lost my job. A stranger in a grocery store, just like this. She told me that kindness was meant to be passed along." Sarah felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Lucas shifted again, and she looked down at his peaceful face. Her son deserved to eat, and her pride seemed less important when weighed against his needs. "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you." David smiled and gestured toward the checkout lanes. "Shall we?" As they walked toward the front of the store, Sarah found herself walking a little straighter. The fluorescent lights seemed warmer somehow, and the weight of her worries felt just a little bit lighter. At the checkout counter, David handed his credit card to the cashier with quiet dignity. He didn't make a show of his generosity, didn't draw attention to what he was doing. He simply paid for the formula as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Thank you," Sarah said again as they stepped outside into the golden afternoon light. "Take care of that beautiful boy," David replied. "And maybe someday, when you're in a position to help someone else, you'll remember this moment." Sarah nodded, holding Lucas close as she watched David walk away. She didn't know then that the man who had just helped her was the CEO of the very grocery store chain where they had met. She simply knew that kindness had found her when she needed it most. As she walked to her car, the container of formula secure in her arms along with her sleeping son, Sarah made a quiet promise. Someday, when her circumstances were different, she would pass along the gift she had received today. The kindness of strangers, she realized, was really just love wearing a different face.